was 26, I moved from New York City to the suburbs of New Jersey. I was starting a new venture in my life, and I went to work for a corporate video production company. Now, the guy who hired me was really old. I mean, he had to be like 60. He had white hair, white beard, he was former Navy captain, and he ran the video company out of his home. Now, I was the first girl that he hired. There were 3 other people working there. They were all male, and I don't know if it was because I was female, because I had had a good GPA from NYU Film School, or because I had actual movie credits to my name. But from day one, I knew that he resented me. Furthermore, I felt like this 60-year-old man was like intimidated by me, which was really backwards. And it was especially backwards not only because he was my boss, but because he made it evident every day by saying things like, "We shouldn't say that in front of Jessica because she's a square." And yes, he used that word. Old, right? And then he'd say it anyway. So for example, he'd say, "Oh, we really shouldn't tell Jessica how we all got high together. Oh, now she's gonna tell the cops because she's probably a narc." Or, "We shouldn't tell Jessica about how we all got dressed up for Halloween as women because that'll freak her out." And the worst one was the only job that I got to edit while I worked for him, because I only survived there for a week, was this home video that he had shot of this art show in the Netherlands. And it was, it was like a week long. There were different types of artists. And he watched me, I swear, for a reaction as he made sure to point out the footage of this one performance artist. Now, I think artist was a loosely used term here. What it was a live performance of a man walking his dog. The dog being another man who was naked. I would call that bondage, but my boss sat there and watched and said, "Oh, make sure you use that. That's good stuff." And I swear he was watching to see if I was shocked. And all I could think was, this guy has grossly underestimated the type of experience you get living in New York City. Not only had I pretty much seen it all, I had lived with it all. Now, just the year before, I had lived in this warehouse apartment, a converted warehouse, which basically meant it was a giant empty warehouse that they had filled with cubicles called rooms. And the advantage of having these little cubicles is you could fit like 8 of them in one warehouse apartment. So me and 7 of my best friends, actually I moved in with complete strangers, shared this one warehouse apartment. The worst part was the kitchen, which, unlike in some households, it didn't really work out that anyone cleaned it. There was layers of slime on every surface and multiple cockroach carcasses. I got around that by just never using the kitchen, but unfortunately I also had to share the bathroom with 7 other people. It was equally as disgusting, but the good part was there was ample reading material. You see, Evan, who was sort of the band leader of the apartment, he was the guy who we gave our rent check to, was an actual band leader, like a rock band. And he was like 32 and still trying to be a rock star, which, like, give up on your dreams, come on. Yeah, I've since learned maybe that's not that old. But the one thing that Evan had going for him, being in a rock band, was that he owned a van to transport around all that equipment, and so that made him uniquely qualified for his day job, which was delivering porn to all the newsstands in New York City. Yeah, and being a 32-year-old male, occasionally some of them would drop off the back of the truck and land in our bathroom. So I shit you not, The stack of pornos in the bathroom was higher than my knees when I was sitting on the toilet, which I tried to avoid doing as often as possible. But the good news was that I got a great experience reading titles like Penthouse and Hustler and Jugs. And I think, Evan was especially considerate because he probably guessed that most of us didn't want to actually touch the magazines. So he'd leave them open for us. I mean, just spread wide to whatever page he had been last reading so that we could see what was spread wide in the pages. But even that, that experience to me was not all that shocking because I had pretty much seen it all at this point. Just a couple summers before that, I had sublet an apartment. It was from an ad I had seen in the Village Voice. I didn't know the guy. And it was just for the summer. I was in the dorms at NYU at the time, and I had the summer with no place to stay. So I went to see the apartment, and it was a studio apartment, which if you've never seen one before, it's you walk in, there's like a little kitchenette here, and a little bathroom here, and then a room. And that's the entire apartment. And in the room, there were 2 twin-size beds and 2 dressers, and that was it. Now, he sublet the apartment to me, and I was thinking, okay, it's not a huge space, but for one person, it's awesome. This is great. Yeah. So about 3 days after I moved in, I heard the key in the lock, and the door opened up, and in walked Katie. She had also sublet the apartment for the summer. The good news is Katie was really sweet. She was just this really easygoing person, and the only weird thing about her is she kept weird hours. Like she would go to work at like 9 o'clock at night and come home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so finally, after a little while, we were both home and awake at the same time, and I said, so Katie, like, what do you do for a living? And I will say this, she was actually every man's fantasy. She was young and beautiful and working her way through college as a stripper. So I got to ask her, thank you to the men in the audience who are feeling me there. I got to ask her about it because I was curious, and she said basically what it boils down to is all men are disgusting pigs, and she never wanted anything to do with any of them. At least that's what she said to me, except there was this one night where I woke up around 4 a.m. Now, normally Katie was quiet when she got home from work, but this time something woke me up. It was not only the light going on, there was also music playing. And again, our beds were in the same room, so I heard the music and I kind of rolled over and looked, and apparently Katie had decided to bring her work home with her. So yeah, I got a free strip tease, yay! But even that wasn't all that shocking to me because at this point, I had pretty much seen it all. Just the summer before, my friend Raquel had asked me to stay with her for the summer because again, I was without a place to stay. Now, Raquel was also every straight man's fantasy in that when I met her, she was straight. After I moved in with her, she was a college girl experimenting. Not with me, mind you, but she got a girlfriend. Her name was Carrie, and Carrie was very sweet and very butch and kept some very unusual hours. Now, we were in a loft apartment. If you don't know what that looks like, you'd walk in and over your head was a very low wall where the beds were, a very low ceiling. And then it opened up into a small room that basically fit a fold-out couch. And then you'd have to take a ladder to get up to the loft area. And the loft area had 2 queen-size beds, and I had my own and she had her own. And Carrie ended up sleeping over a lot. But like I said, Carrie had really unusual hours, so she'd usually end up showing up around 12 or 1 in the morning after work. And it turns out that Carrie made her living as a dominatrix. So not only did Raquel get to experiment with a girl, she also got to experiment with being submissive. And lucky me, there were no walls to separate us. So I could only clench my eyes closed so tightly, and I could not ever turn my REM CD up loud enough to drown out the noise. The worst thing I heard, though, through the entire time I stayed with her was during one of our morning debriefs. Raquel was very excited about her experiments, and every morning she'd be like, "Oh my God, Jessica, I have to tell you about last night." And I'd be like, "No, you really don't." But yeah, there was one morning that I think actually shocked me when she said, "Oh my God, Jessica, it was amazing." She got her whole fist in there. So as my boss sat there watching me for a reaction, all I could think was, if you are trying to shock me, you are going to have to try a hell of a lot harder than that. Fortunately for me, and for all of you, he didn't.